Hi, Colin Marshall here. You know about Notebook on Cities and Culture, but do you know about Los Angeles, the city in cinema? For the past few months, I've been creating video essays about the variety of Los Angeles as revealed in the films shot and set there, like Blade Runner, Her, Drive, Strange Days, and The Killing of a Chinese Bookie. You can find out more about them and watch all of them at colinmarshall.org. On Sunday, January 25th, 2015, I'm coming to Portland, Oregon's Hollywood Theater to give a screening and live talk called Portland and Los Angeles, the Cities in Cinema. I'll show and discuss never-before-seen Los Angeles video essays there, but it'll also be the world premiere of Portland, the City in Cinema, my long-form video essay on the roles the City of Roses has played in films like Zero Effect, Old Joy, Cold Weather, and My Own Private Idaho. Also, we'll definitely all drink a lot of beers. For details, visit colinmarshall.org. And to buy your tickets, visit hollywoodtheater.org. Thanks. Notebook on Cities and Culture's Korea Tour is brought to you by Daniel Murphy, David Hayes, and Polar Inertia Journal, an outlet for artists and researchers documenting the urban condition at polarinertia.com. At this point, on a scale of 1 to 10, how tired are you of the pun soul food?
Very, very tired of it because it doesn't really, encompass all that Korean food is. Soul food is very different from everything else in Korea. Like, I just got back from Gyeongju, and to say Gyeongju food is soul food, it wouldn't quite work out. It's not soul at all. Soul has become this kind of a mix mash of almost everything, and it's also because you have a huge population of people. The quality sometimes is not quite there. Some people are just there trying to do like a cash grab. They're like, let's make a restaurant and let's make some money because everyone has to eat. So, and the expression, like soul food is food for your soul. Sure, Korean food definitely is that. But to equate it with this city, not always.
Right.
It's hit and miss.
It doesn't. Seoul's a big part of Korea, but it doesn't stand for the entirety of Korea. But it's here in Seoul today we're recording, specifically in... Now, are we still in Insadong? What neighborhood are we in?
Oh, right now we're right across the street from Insadong. We're in Gyeongju Samga. So Nagwan is literally right across the street. So Nagwan Dong, what's right next to Insadong. There's so many dongs in Korea.
It's going to be hard to keep straight after only a few weeks here as I've had so far. But that's exactly where I sit today with Daniel Gray, who is very involved in food in Seoul. I'll say that rather than soul food because I too am very tired living in Los Angeles' Koreatown of the pun soul food. He is a partner here at Ongo Food Communications, which it's called a culinary tourism company. What else is it?
It's exactly, and a cooking school. Right. So
there's a class going on right outside the window. We're sitting in the office. A class is going on right there.
Yeah. So we focus on introducing Korean food to travelers to Korea, and we started with the cooking school. And with the cooking school, we found out that if people didn't know where to get the food, it didn't really accomplish the task. So we did a market tour with that, and then we found the market tour was very popular. And so we looked into other opportunities. So we started doing like nighttime dining tours because people didn't know where to eat at night. And we were tired of them going to bad franchise restaurants because we feel that people wanted to have a sense of, adventure. So we went to very local Korean restaurants, and drink Korean food. And we found that the meal table was a perfect forum to discuss Korean culture. So, yeah.
It seems to be where Korean culture happens to a large extent, around the meal table, whether you're Korean or whether you're trying out Korean culture and are foreign or anything, right? It's such a central place.
Food is a very important part of Korean life. Everything does happen around the dinner table. Usually gifts of food are usually given. It's a very important gift to give. Like, if you go travel to another city, you don't go try to buy a bunch of keychains or, knickknacks or something like that. You should bring back the area's specialty snack or vegetable or something. Right. And people really do appreciate good food. If you get something that is the way to put it is that Koreans always care about your health. And so giving food is like giving good health. And if you have your health, that's all you need. And that's why food is so important in Korea.
It's certainly a better idea than giving knickknacks, because you don't want to fill somebody's house up with knickknacks, especially these days. So I plan to bring back whatever food I can when I return to the States. But this idea of food tours you do here at Ongo, I was browsing the list of tours available, and there are many. But my eye was most taken by, what's it called? Daniel Gray's Ultimate Korean Food Tour, something like that? What goes into a tour like that?
It's, well, I mean, like, it's a very local sort of tour. Like, we go to all the places that I find are my favorites that are run by local, local chefs, home chefs. Also, we like to go to the traditional markets because that's where all the food comes from. So we want to get the freshest, best quality ingredients in Korea. And so I try to introduce that, and we have a lot of fun throughout the day.
It sounds like that specific tour is pretty different every time, right? You're making is it a wholly different experience each time you do the Ultimate Food Tour? Slightly different?
It depends on the guests. So, like, people that want to take that tour, some of them want to find the best sundubu, which is a spicy soft tofu stew. Some people ask me to take them to the best place to get jjajangmyeon, so which is a black bean noodle dish. These are kind of nostalgic dishes for people. So people really want to find, sure, they want a sense of adventure and sense of like finding the crazy stuff like the live octopus or like fermented skate or like they want to get top quality ingredients like hanu, the top grade beef. But they also want to try foods that remind them of home or foods that they have seen a picture of and they really want to try. And yeah, so it's just kind of an adventure of around food.
Now, when somebody comes to Korea for the first time and wants to eat Korean food the best they can, what perception, what ideas do you find they already have about Korean food? What do they bring to the table as far as what they know or think or assume?
You know what, a long time ago, it was kind of like a blank slate. But these days, everyone always thinks of barbecue. Barbecue is one of the main things that they always think of.
And they often think of all you can eat.
Yeah, yeah. Which is quite unfortunate, I think, because it's because when you... Anyway, maybe we'll have to get into it another time, but I feel like some people are taking advantage of that because the Korean way of eating is like the restaurateurs are supposed to be generous because they're offering you food and nourishment, but there should be kind of like a common understanding. Like when Koreans eat, they eat everything together. So if you have grilled meat, you should wrap it in a leaf and you should have some sauce. And then after you eat that, you might have some kimchi. But you shouldn't eat a whole thing of kimchi, eat all the leaves, and eat just a very small amount of meat.
Right.
It's like Koreans eat in a very balanced way. Right. So when Koreans eat, like they eat all the banchan and everything together. It's not just like eating just one thing.
Right. Right. It's not sequential like that. Now, it's interesting that when I've come here and I've met, my girlfriend is from Korea, but I haven't met her family over here yet. So I've been meeting them, and before they get to know me, they will ask questions of me like, can I, or they'll, even though I can understand when they're speaking in Korean, they'll ask her in Korean, can he use chopsticks, or can he sit on the floor and eat, or can he eat Korean food? And those first two, okay, maybe they don't know that the current generation of Americans are sort of widely trained in chopsticks or just used to them. And maybe they don't know that they can probably sit on the floor, even if they don't often do it in America. But it's that third question, can he eat Korean food? It's fascinating that it's phrased, this might just be a linguistic issue, but that it's phrased not in terms of willingness or taste, but ability. Now, if you've heard that too, why do Korean people sometimes think in terms of, can they eat Korean food? Can this foreigner do it? Can they take on this task?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of Koreans, they have, they've been taught that a lot of foreigners, they can't enjoy the flavors of Korea.
Who was teaching that?
I think just through media and the TV and everything like that. If you watch any of the Korean dramas or something like that, the way the foreigners are typically depicted, and also on, on the news when a politician will come or something like that, or they tend to depict Korean food as something that is like very alien, and it's only something that Korean people can enjoy.
Right. Or they think of Old Boy where he's eating the live squid. Is that Korean food? Is that what they do?
Yeah, well, I mean, Korean food does have that perception of being a bit extreme.
Right.
And so I guess Koreans don't really understand that like in the global mind share that it's getting more popular. It's visually appealing. And right now there's a shift in the thinking about food, and Korean food really does fit into that main idea now. And but probably your girlfriend's her parents, they might have never met a foreigner before. Maybe they're thinking that, well, to accommodate you, maybe they should prepare your country's food.
Which is, I still don't know what American food is. And I think this is time to get into your background, because you're well placed to do what you do, because you're between Korea and America in a sense. You as I say, you have the name Daniel Gray. You speak English like an American, but what's your background?
Well, I'm adopted. So I was born here. I lived here for 5 years of my life, and then I was adopted by an American family. I grew up in the States, went to school, worked for a while, and then decided to travel. So I came here first. I liked it, and I've stayed. So it's been really good.
Growing up, did you think you were always going to pursue Korea in some way because you knew you had roots there?
Maybe in the back of my mind, but I just, after graduating, I was going through the same thing that many people do. It's like, what am I going to do with my life? What's my career going to be? And after I worked for a while, I paid off some of my bills, and I was like, well, if this is all there is, maybe, I should travel first. Right. And then I'll come back to this if I have to.
Growing up in Delaware, was there much Korean food around?
Not really. I mean, there was a Korean family that my family was close to, so we would go to their house and we would have meals with them. We would go to a Korean grocery store that was probably like a 45-minute drive away. So I can't say there were a lot. Sometimes we would go to like a Korean church and have some food there, but no, there weren't Korean restaurants on every corner.
So when did you first come to Korea, and what did it feel like to be here?
I came in 2005, and it was very different. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know what to do. I was first in the city of Gyeongju, which is a very country sort of town. It is a tourist sort of place, but it's very different from Seoul. And yeah, I had no idea, Like I woke up early the next morning thinking that I would have a Korean meal, but I had no idea what a Korean breakfast was.
Right.
And I found out very quickly that Koreans don't really eat breakfast outside. The streets are completely empty. So there wasn't even anything like the equivalent of like an American diner that's open very early to get breakfast.
Right.
Years later, I found out that most Koreans eat breakfast at home. Their mother would prepare it, and usually rice and soup and side dishes and stuff. But my first meal was at the only place that was open that early in the morning, which was a hangover soup place.
You didn't have a hangover,
No,
but that's what you had.
Hangover. No, not at all. But they were the only ones that are open like 24 hours. So and my first meal was this bubbling hot bowl of pork spine bones.
Sure.
And a bowl of rice. And I was like, this is very, very interesting.
Now, had you familiarized yourself with the language yet at all, or anything, or were you dropping yourself in completely to Korea, just as prepared as life made you?
You know what? I came here thinking that the language is somewhere in the back of my mind or something. I'll pick it up when I get it.
Yeah, because you were 5.
Yeah.
So did you have? I'm curious about this, because did you have remnants of Korean that were still in your mind? Could you think in Korean in some sense, even when you were in high school or whatever in Delaware?
No. I mean, like when you're that young and you grow up in America, and during that time when I grew up, like during the 80s, it was kind of like the general idea was everyone needs to be American. Everyone needs to speak English, and everyone has to be, American.
Or else you're not going to make it in America.
Exactly. And so there was kind of a lot of resistance between me and my parents. My parents and I were fighting because they wanted me to kind of get in touch with my Korean culture, and I was like, no, I want to eat pizza and play soccer and stuff like that.
Yes.
But they did try to send me these culture camps and everything, and I thank them now. Right. But back then, I was very resistant to it.
So ultimately, did you find you could draw upon what you had learned before age 5 linguistically?
No, not really. I mean, I had to study very hard. I had to go to school, and then I slowly picked up the language. Yeah.
When did you begin writing? Because you do the blog, Seoul Eats. When did you start that? When were you first writing about food? I mean, how long did that come after you had your first really good meal in Korea? Like maybe the pork spine was great. I don't know, but what was the eating you did that made you realize you could be writing about food in Seoul?
Actually, it wasn't writing. It wasn't about food at all. It was I had written some articles about my experience of being adopted and then meeting my Korean mother. And I wrote for a magazine, and a rival magazine saw the article. They liked it, and they asked me to write. And they asked me, so what can you write about? And I told them that I'd like to write about food. And so that's how it all started.
So what was the experience of meeting your Korean mother like?
It's great. You know, she's first thing she said was 오래간만이요, which is like
No
nice.
doubt.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we were just very comfortable with each other. She was, she wanted to know how I was. The main thing, what she wanted to do was, she said that she wanted to thank my parents for raising me. And I thought that was a very interesting sentiment. You know, it's just like, not thank you for coming back to me or something. She was very grateful to my American parents. Because she knew that she couldn't raise me. So it's cool. She still sends me kimchi. I go visit her home, you know.
When did you realize you would be living here for a longer term?
I think I realized probably after I met my mother. I met her like 3 years after I was here. I really put it off, and I wish I hadn't.
Why didn't you want to do it right away?
There was a lot of misinformation going on then.
Sometimes I hear they're hard to find too. Just basically like offices will say, we don't know.
That, yeah, there was that, but there was, you know, a lot of misinformation. I thought that trying to find my mother would mean that I would have to go to the U.S. military, and there were other crazy rumors and stuff going on then. So I didn't know what was
worse.
I thought that there would be finding my mother would mean there would be untold consequences.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I thought that if I did that, you know, like. Maybe the U.S. Korean military would be like, okay, now you're Korean, so now join
us. Yeah, do your service. Get to you 2 years. We need you.
Yeah. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't mind doing the military. I think that'd be fun. It'd be exercising for 2 years and.
It's exercise, and it seems like for Korean men, it's really a bonding thing too. Like you're in the society of Korean men even more if you've been in the military. I don't know. I do find it sort of hard to befriend Korean men. And I always chalk it up to like, well, maybe it's because I didn't do the army that separates me. Is that a foolish way of thinking? Or?
Koreans do say that guys that before they go to the military and afterwards are very, very different. And so I think the military probably does train them for like how tough Korean life is. You know, it's like it's not the easiest society to live in if you're Korean, I guess.
Right. It's true. It seems quite hard to live in Korea if you're born here and you've always lived here. Harder than it is if you're a foreigner here, for example, like me, where you're exempt from a lot of pressure. But in either case, if you're whoever you are in Korea, you can eat very, very well. And do you remember, were there certain meals you ate here early on that made you realize you really loved Korean food?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, one of my favorite things was all the soups and stews, especially sundubu. That was one of my favorite things that I've always had. And, of course, barbecue has always been great. Let's see, any of the rice dishes, noodle dishes. Yeah, I really like a lot of Korean foods. But there were things that I had to get used to. I wasn't used to things like probably like pork belly at first. I didn't like grilled pork belly.
Didn't like samgyeopsal?
I did not like samgyeopsal at first.
Wow.
Well, I mean, with all the fat and everything on it, it was like I had always been trained.
Yeah, America's like, don't eat that.
Exactly. So, so that it took me a while to get used to that.
Right.
But I found the equivalent in another type of meat. It's called garmegisao, which is near the, like the diaphragm of the pig, and it's very similar to beef. And from then I started to like more pork. I didn't used to eat a lot of pork in America. I just didn't like the taste of it. But in Korea, I was like, oh, I really like the taste here.
I hear it's better here.
It is much better here.
I hear the beef's better there. What do you think?
What's that? Beef is better
In America, I've heard that. I don't know whether to believe it or not, but I hear it.
It's it's a difference in preference because Koreans like meat that is very fatty, and while Americans like things that are very lean. Also, they like to dry age their meats. Here, they don't like dry aging. They don't like anything that is very gamey in flavor. And so when they get a piece of meat, it should have like lots of white marbling through it, and they call it snowflake beef. Yeah, and that's the kind that they like. They quickly grill it and then wrap it in a leaf and eat it.
Yeah, I mean, it's good stuff. There's no Korean food I have complaints with, but sometimes Korean people will be surprised when I mention certain things I like. But tell me, other than samgyeopsal, did you have other moments, other Korean foods where your reaction was, wow, I must be even more American than I thought because you at first didn't like the foods you didn't like at first and thought it was cultural?
I mean, the main things are a lot of the very nostalgic sort of foods for Korea, especially like sundae, which is a pig intestine stuffed with pig's blood and rice,
right,
or sweet potato noodles. That was something that took me a long time to get used to, especially when they served it with steamed lung and liver.
Right.
So I mean, the flavor it's kind of like a coppery kind of, you can taste the blood, the minerals and stuff.
Even my girlfriend doesn't like that, but I have to admit because of that, I eat it like in secret, sort of. I like it a lot, but I imagine, I haven't had it in Korea yet. It's always at like Korean grocery stores in Koreatown in Los Angeles. I imagine there's like, you have, 5 sundae specialists off the top of your head that are just the best in the world.
Well, yeah, actually I do.
I'm not saying name them off now. But.
Yeah, but I'm saying like, there's the sundae that Koreans find to be very, very good. It might not be the ones that I like, because like Koreans like it's very it's more like coagulated blood. It's more like a sausage sort of thing, and it's got a very like earthy sort of like coppery sort of flavor, mineral sort of flavor to it. And for me, I don't really like that. I like the one that's a little bit more subtle. So like less blood, more like sweet potato noodles or something like that. So yeah, but it's a nostalgic food for Koreans. So that's something that they really like. Another food that I didn't like when I started here was like jokbal, which are it's slowly braised pig's feet. And I was just like, what is this? It's very rubbery in texture. There's not a lot of meat to it. And it's I don't know. It's one of those things.
You
like
have no nostalgia for that.
I have no nostalgia for that, and plus you're supposed to dip it in like a fermented shrimp sauce, and if you don't understand all the cultural reasons for eating that way, and why Koreans are eating pig's feet and pig's head and the sausage and everything, you can't really enjoy it. Other things are like a lot of so offal. Like Koreans eat a lot of offal, like intestines, liver. They eat the stomach of cows. Liver. It's very, very unusual sort of food, but the longer you live here, you start to like it a lot more.
Yeah.
You get to appreciate it. When
you talk about Koreans' nostalgic food, what period is the nostalgia harkening back to?
Well, I would say probably from the 60s and 70s. It was just a time when Korea didn't have a lot of food, and during this time there was an influx of American food because of U.S. military, and a lot of that was considered to be very luxurious. Like spam is considered to be a luxurious sort of meal.
Still available in many a context.
Yeah. You just put spam, cheeses. They believe that cheese should come in a plastic wrap, and people always like to take a piece of the sliced American cheese and put it on top of ramen.
Interesting. So they eat American cheese here. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But
I don't like that stuff.
But, the plastic wrapped American cheese. Yeah. But that was a time when this was such a luxurious item.
Right.
I mean, even things like during the 40s and 50s, like milk was like a new thing here.
Right.
When Koreans would never drink milk because it was considered to be stealing from the cows.
I guess I can see how the logic works.
Yeah. And when people started to drink milk, they were like, wow, it's sweet. I've never really thought of milk tasting sweet, but by comparison, yeah, it's a culture that the sweetest thing that they had was honey.
Right.
And then you had things coming in like sugar and adding sugar to everything became a fad, and then MSG and
Yes. It's interesting the way that by East Asian standards, Korea has taken more to Western food and drink than most countries. It seems like, as you say, there's the milk thing, but I'm not saying this country is dairy crazy or anything, but there seems to be more of it than in Japan and China. And as well, the sweet thing, it's like you say, this was a country where the only sweet thing was honey, and now it's almost a meme about Korean food. You come here and you eat foreign cuisine interpreted in a Korean way. It's always going to be sweeter. The pasta's going to be sweeter. The garlic bread's going to be sweeter.
Yeah, they put sugar on garlic bread. It's really weird.
Yeah, why did that take such a hold, considering there's no really heritage of sweet foods here?
I think that it just someone had made it, and it was a way of making the food tastier. It was. The palate wasn't used to that, and so it was almost like a missing flavor in everything. So when Koreans cook, they always believe that it should have a balance of all the different flavors.
Right.
And only in the 16th century did one of those elements come in, which was the chili. So you started adding spice to it. But then later on, adding sugar, that was kind of a luxury thing as well. So you're supposed to be balancing all the different flavors: the sweet, the savory, the salty, the spicy. So it should all be there. And sour, of course. Koreans love sour.
Yes, that's true. You do tend to get every flavor mixed into every other one here, which I like a lot. I wonder, do you have nostalgic foods that are American?
I mean, there are certain things I can't really get here, mainly, and this is actually a good thing. There are some, Koreans won't allow, certain foods into, Korea, because it has some additives or it has some sort of preservative in it that they, feel is unhealthy. So, it's very difficult to get things like, deli cold cuts. So I can't make a big, huge, hulking sandwich because the slices that they have is just very little. Right. And also, sandwiches tend to have a lot more vegetables and, vegetables and sauce and stuff on it, and one slice of ham or something.
Do you think that it's a hard question to answer, but that sort of the average Korean has a more heightened food awareness compared to Westerners? Like, some Westerners will eat just about anything. I've had those moments myself, and it's like it's food, whatever. But do you think Koreans think more about food? I don't mean necessarily that they're always eating better, but that it's something that they're more aware of at all times, like what the food is, what they want, what they're going to get, how they're going to get it.
It's all about perspective, and Koreans always view food as medicine. Alcohol is also medicine. Sure. So they always they have a very different approach on why they're eating it. They're not eating it because it's extreme or very delicious or it's something that's like the cool new thing now. Of course, they do have those reasons behind it as well, but traditionally when Koreans eat something, if you market it as a healthy, well-being food, it will sell better than something that is really, really fun or exciting.
The appeal of well-being, I guess.
Yeah, well-being, yeah. But now it's changing to eco and organic. You know, it's like the new keywords are coming in. But the idea is that it should be something that is nourishing and good for your body. And so, and there should be a sense of balance when you're eating. So even when Koreans are eating Western food, it should be kind of suited for the Korean palate. And I'm not saying the Korean palate wants something that's sweet, but it should be something like if you're eating spaghetti, it should have that sour note to it. It should have a little bit of savoriness to it. It should have a little bit of salt to it. With the noodles, though, you should also serve it with some sort of pickle or a salad or something like that because they need to counterbalance that. If you don't have those things, Koreans feel like their palate is it's coated, it's unbalanced, so they'll tend to get a little upset. For example, there was a high-end pizza place here that was charging something like I think it was like $20 a pizza, like small pizza or something, and they weren't serving pickles with their pizza, and Korean people were getting very upset. But this was a restaurant made by an Italian chef, and he was like, "We don't do pickles in Italy. We're not going to do pickles here."
Yes.
But that was a major turnoff for Korean people.
So I take it at your pizza pub, Brew 314 in Insadong, the neighborhood next to us, you have pickles.
We have pickles.
What else do you have? What's different about the pizza at Brew 314 than other Korean pizza?
We do a very thin crust pizza, a lot more toppings, yeah, I mean, our sauces, it's a little bit, I guess more, herbal. It's got more like, basil and oregano and stuff on it. It's a little bit more tart. And we make the pizzas like big enough that, and with a lot of slices so people can share. So it's supposed to be food that goes with beer.
I see. So in the shareability and the beer compatibility, this is almost Korean food.
Yeah. They need to have, so beer is kind of sharp. It's got that, the carbonation and everything there. So if they eat some pizza, they have to have some beer. You know, it works out perfectly there.
And now is a better time to have beer with pizza than it was before in Korea, right? Things have changed with beer, haven't they?
Yeah, well, craft beers are getting very big here, and craft beers have been popular for the last like 3 years or so. And the Korean beer palate is getting more sophisticated.
What was it like in 2005 when you got here, the beer situation?
Well, I mean, there was, Height, Cass, and, OB, which all taste the same pretty much. If you wanted to get something exotic, you would drink, the bottled beer. Right. So things like Heineken, Guinness, and those things. But now it's becoming, Koreans are getting tired of those beers. They want to have something else. They want to have hoppier ales, and they want to have strong lagers. So it's becoming a a trend, like not just in Seoul but all over.
So, given all your experience in Korean food, from the traditional to the barbecue to the nostalgic, why a pizza place?
Well, I live in Korea, and I'm not going to rely on expats to pay my rent. And pizza is the easiest thing that you can make in a small space. This was my first restaurant in Korea, and I wanted to have something that was easy to run with minimal staff and high margin sort of products. I do a lot of restaurant consulting, so when I tell other businesses what to do, the same thing that I decided to do for my own business.
So it's really I guess your money's really where your mouth is in that case.
Yeah, exactly. And when I started it, it was kind of a side project. I didn't have a lot of money to start it, so I decided, okay, what's the best that I could do here? Right. And I really did believe that craft beers was going to take off, so I said, let's go for it.
Now, do you find you have? I mean, here in this neighborhood, what is it? If it was in Itaewon, I would imagine you draw a lot of foreigners. Here, what's the balance? Koreans, foreigner, in terms of clientele?
Oh, it's like 70% Koreans, 30% foreigners. I mean, if 30%.
I see. So majority Koreans. And is pizza considered an American food here?
It's not considered, no, it's considered an Italian food here.
Okay.
Koreans like real, more Italian style food than American style. Italian food, if that makes any
It
sense.
makes total sense because whenever one cuisine is imported to another country, it becomes different. Of course, it couldn't do otherwise. But what do they think? How to put it? What is when a Korean person wants American food? What do they get?
They usually get hamburgers, and they'll go to a steak restaurant.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's really, really, literally sort of meat and potatoes, that kind of thing. Yeah. And is it Koreanized in any way?
Well, I guess so. Hamburgers tend to have a lot more vegetables on it. It's usually made for sharing. The sides that you'll get are probably a salad with some French fries, sort of thing. There isn't a lot of customization to it.
Yeah, not a lot of custom. I mean, in Los Angeles, there's this chain, The Counter, which is 100% about burger customization. That's their whole premise. But here, you don't customize.
No, it stresses people out. They want to have the one thing, and they don't want to try to make something else.
Americans are like, even if there's no choices available, they're just rattling off customization after customization when they order.
Yeah, Koreans just don't tend to do that.
Right. It's a better situation for the Korean waiter, I would assume, not having to memorize all that stuff. When in America, it's a different story. But when you began writing about food professionally, as you say, it's what you stated you wanted to write about. Were you writing about food in Seoul exclusively at first? How were you going about it? What were you thinking your interest was in food writing?
Well, I wanted to review restaurants. There wasn't anyone really critically reviewing restaurants. A lot of the magazines and the newspapers and the internet sites, they were advertising. Right. So they didn't
English or Korean, it was the same situation.
Basically, yeah. Well, the Korean media, you're not allowed to criticize a restaurant. Badly criticize.
You're not allowed to. Is there some law that says you can't speak negatively about a restaurant? So you have to say only if you can't say something nice, don't say something at all. Is in law.
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
And also you can't because the media is government controlled. You can't promote a certain restaurant.
I see.
So you can't. So you could talk about, let's say, a pizza restaurant in Gyeongju Samga, but I can't give the name in a newspaper.
So you're always reading between the lines in Korean food writing.
Right. So, but on the internet, you could put that information out there.
I see.
And so that's why if you watch any Korean TV shows, they tend to not show you the name of the restaurant.
It's always blurred out. That's true.
Blurred out. Yeah, or they always do the sign. They take the shot below the signboard.
Right. Yes. I was watching your appearance on the Kimchi Chronicles, and I noticed, you're going a few places, but I can never see where they are. It's just because that would be promotion?
Yeah.
I see.
And the government can't, use public money to promote one company. Of course, that does make sense.
If you think about it in that public media terms.
Exactly.
But when you were writing, you were writing where and how? Were you being... What was the sort of, you wanted to introduce this critical element then?
Yeah. My first review was a very negative review of, a Greek restaurant. And
do you remember what was bad about it?
Oh, it was, the food was cold. It was it wasn't well plated. It didn't have a lot of flavor. It was supposed to be like Mediterranean food, but it didn't, it was missing elements. And part of it was that, they couldn't get certain ingredients like feta cheese or olives or something like that. And, but for the price point at that time, it was a bit unreasonable for it. So that's why I was very honest and told people, like, this is what I think of this food, and this is the way that it should be, and it's not. So the restaurant wasn't. They were trying to be something that they were not.
That's the worst thing a restaurant can do in some ways. And when did Seoul Eats enter into the picture?
About a couple months after that.
So the writing career was really ratcheting up, and so you decided to start Seoul Eats?
I mean, I had a regular job. Right. So I had a regular job. I was working, I was working as a teacher. So I was working probably like 50 some hours, 60 some hours then. It was a very good lifestyle. I was, making, a good living, and the food was something that I did just for fun. Right. And then people started to respond, and I thought that was quite interesting. It was quite fun.
Right. Now, is it because you were giving them the critical perspective, you could tell them what was good, what was bad, and others weren't doing that quite yet, or they weren't used to that?
They were, I guess they just weren't used to that. Restaurants in Korea, they close all the time, so people just didn't seem to really bother about it. And pictures were an important thing. Adding some of my own personal perspectives on things was good. But I think that people just wanted to know, like, all right, they wanted like a curated opinion. Is it worth my time and my money to go to this restaurant?
You mentioned that extreme rate of opening and closure here in Seoul. And it's interesting because it speaks to some divide I don't quite understand about eating culture here, which is that it's the classic story. Maybe this will go away at some point because of economic changes, but of the guy who retires from Samsung at 50, 60 and just, I'll open a fried chicken place. Or people are just like, you know what, I'll open a cafe. They won't have any particular background in running a cafe or seeming interest sometimes in running a restaurant or what have you, but then they'll open one. Maybe it'll go for a while, maybe it'll go for a very short time. But there's this idea that, yeah, running a restaurant is something you might just do, and maybe it'll be fine, probably be fine. But in America, we have this, maybe this is false, I don't know, but the sense that if you want to open a restaurant, fine. That better be the one thing you care about in life. Because if it isn't, I mean, if it's that, you have a 1% chance of success. If it's not your obsession, it's 0%. You know, it's like, it's so daunting. Whereas here, it's like almost a casual thing. What do you think the difference is?
It's so easy to open up restaurants here. And because you have, it's kind of like a last resort for most people. It's just like, I can't work for Samsung or anything. A lot of people are actually forced to retire around like 45. Actually,
it's even more forced than I thought.
Yeah. So they're forced to retire early, so they need to start a second career.
Right. Taxi driver, fried chicken. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So people need to still make income to support their family. So this is something that they do. So restaurants, they tend to be very easy to open. You just have to take a class. You get the building. You can get it completely fitted and ready to open in probably about a month, to be honest with you. Like mine took about 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's
in America, it seems like it takes months. You see the place that's just slowly, well, there's demolition happening now. Now we're getting the licenses and, oh God, the legal stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can do it very, very fast here. So everything is fast in Korea. So that's why everyone's willing to give it a chance.
Right.
If it works, it works. And if not, at least I can eat.
Yeah. And there's that. There's the sense that if you open a restaurant, maybe you won't be a wild success here, but you'll get by. Whereas in America, it's sort of like, yeah, okay, I'm prepared to lose money for 5 years and then maybe I'll blow up. You know, it's that difference, like that it's a way, you're sort of guaranteed, not guaranteed, but nearly a kind of minimum level of success here, it seems like in a restaurant. You might go bust, true, but you'll probably do okay. Is that how it is here?
Yes and no. It depends on which area and stuff that you're going to. If you go to an area that is developing, and yeah, you might get by. If you're trying to shoot for the moon and go into a very developed sort of area, there's a very good chance that you're going to lose a lot of money.
I see. Is it just because there's so many more people concentrated in Seoul than most American cities? Like, people are going to come by. Is that maybe a difference?
Yeah, maybe.
It's hard to say. I realize there's no good answer, but it is. The difference is there, is it not, between America and Korea and the way restaurants work?
If it looks good, Koreans will tend to try stuff once.
Right.
You know, if you're trying to do a Korean restaurant and you serve a decent meal with, you know, good banchan, good side dishes, good rice, your soup tastes good, people will come back.
It's hard to overstate the importance of banchan to a Korean eater, right? Like, if it's not good, or I've heard Korean people say, if I get less than 5, I don't eat, forget it.
Well, the banchan are a way that the restaurants will kind of show their generosity and how much they care about their guests. And
so if you get too few, it's like, we don't really care about you as a customer.
Well, if you get too few, then you know that it's probably a restaurant that does it's like a noodle restaurant or something like that, and you're expected to pay a lower cost. But the thing is, like, you're not getting a full meal. It is just one thing.
Now, when people come to you wanting food tours or what have you, what do you find people are most often curious about Korean food? What do they want to know when they come to you? And of course, all kinds of different things. But what's common? What are people commonly curious about?
Well, they really want to know the real Korean flavor. That's what they're looking for.
As opposed to what?
Well, I mean, they've probably had Korean food overseas somewhere, and they've been told what Korean food is. They might have seen it on TV or something, but they really want to taste it and see, okay, they want like a benchmarking point. They want to know, okay, this is what this is supposed to taste like. And so in the future, when they have it again, they know like, oh, okay, this is not really Korean food. And they want again a sense of perspective. They want more knowledge. They want to know where it really stands. You came all the way to Korea. We want to try real Korean food.
Seems like, I don't know if this is more common with Americans, but it seems like, back home in America, people are very concerned with authenticity, specifically. Like, what's the real version of this food? What's the real version of that food? Is it more than just Americans who are concerned about that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Singaporeans, Filipinos, we get a lot. Our tours tend to be very multiracial. I mean, multinational.
Well, both of those. I mean, diverse in general.
Yeah, very diverse.
Now, when somebody first gets to Seoul trying to handle this city, and very commonly, in my case, certainly, I'll figure out where it's good to eat. How should people think about eating in this city? And that's a very broad question, I realize, but every city is a little different in the way to approach its food. Some cities, you go to the most famous places first. Some, you go to the pre-gentrifying parts of town. Some, you try to find the cheapest food. What's effective in broad terms of how to think about food in Seoul?
I say go to the markets first, because that's where you're getting the freshest versions of it. There tend to be a lot of stalls there.
The sort of Shijang covered markets, the old ones.
Yeah, those are probably the best ones to kind of see where everything is, like what locals are really eating. If you tend to go to places that are like the most famous restaurants or most expensive restaurants, they tend to be. They're not really Korean food. Like a lot of the most expensive ones are barbecue places, but Koreans tend to go there on special occasions. It's not like an everyday sort of meal. Some of those places will serve like the barbecue places will serve like noodles or the soups, and those are usually more like that's the regular food. So if you eat Hanu, like 1++ grade, which is a top grade of Korean beef, you might be a bit disappointed because it's very expensive and it's a smaller portion that you would get, let's say, elsewhere. But if you try some of their other dishes, like what normal people would eat, let's say for lunch or something like that, you might be like, oh wow, it's really tasty. They put a lot of thought into it. Some of the foods, let's say like royal court cuisine or something like that, it might look pretty, but people tend to not really enjoy the flavor of it so much.
Royal court cuisine. What can you say? You get what you get what it sounds like.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I mean, it's very pretty. There's a lot of variety, but people, they want to take a picture of it, and then they're like, okay, well, this is not. It doesn't have that the flavor that they're looking for.
Right. Reminds me of some places I've gone in other countries with Japanese friends all of whose cameras come right out when they see the food. There's the visual thing in food as well. We shouldn't understate, I suppose, that Korea, well, not just Korean, any kind of food, the visual appeal can be a component. But it's interesting. I mean, Korean friends in Los Angeles have asked me on multiple occasions, like, you eat a lot of Korean food here in Miguk Saram. What Korean food can really succeed in America? Because I guess there's the impression that Korean food hasn't taken off in the way that it could in America, other than barbecue, which is its own thing, essentially. And I tell them what I like, but I do wonder what the perception about that is. If Korean food hasn't taken off to the extent that Japanese food has, why might it be? I've heard it chalked up to the visual difference. Everybody has a very distinct image of what sushi looks like, or various other presentation intensive, like sort of visually signature Japanese foods. But if has Korean food not reached its potential in the West, and B, if not, why do you think not?
I don't think it really has, mainly because people are not willing to put their, put the money behind it. Right. Japanese food, the Japanese restaurants, a lot of them are run by non-Japanese.
Right. Often Koreans in Los Angeles, anyway.
Exactly. So people know that the perception is it's very high end, very high quality, and I think that. Overall, the Japanese have done a very good way of kind of making people believe in that perception, and it's visually appealing. It's well presented. People have a real sense of the kind of the barriers, like what you can do and what you can't do at a Japanese place. Everything is a la carte.
Yes.
You can get as many, you can get as much ginger as you want and wasabi as you want, but that's it, that sort of stuff.
Right.
And I think with Koreans, the Korean people, they tend to be more generous with everything. They're so happy that when people come and eat their food. And so there's kind of tends to be like a breakdown on expectations.
Right.
And getting back to the whole panchan idea is if one restaurant is giving unlimited panchan and unlimited meat, and then another place is like, look, like we can't give all the vegetables away. Like the vegetables are more expensive than a lot of the meat sometimes.
Right.
Or you have someone, let's say they're a vegetarian and they go to a Korean barbecue place and they say, oh, we're going to just eat all the panchan.
Right.
And there has to be some rules, I guess.
When I get these questions, what Korean foods could succeed in America? As I say, I name my favorite ones. One of them being Koreans often laugh when I say tteokbokki is one of my favorites, which is just kind of a street food, but you can get various varieties here. I don't know if it can be a successful food in America, but it seems so important to Korea that you got to try with it. Like, what is the significance of tteokbokki?
Getting back to that, I think of all the foods that could probably succeed from a business standpoint, it would probably have to be barbecue.
Really?
And then you can add the other stuff around it.
I see.
You can add tteokbokki as a side.
See.
You can add tteokbokki as a side. You can add bibimbap as a side. You can add all those other things as a side. But what happens is when someone tries to do Korean food, there is no unifying idea. Like Korean food is supposed to be a variety of different things.
Right.
It's supposed to have vegetables and meat and soups and stews.
Which can strike a Westerner as just a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, it's a bunch of stuff.
Right.
Exactly.
It's all delicious stuff.
It is all delicious, but when someone goes in, they need to have like a very set idea of what they're going to get. If I go to a Korean barbecue place, I'm going to get the charcoal. I'm going to get grilled meats. I'm going to get some lettuce for wrapping. I might get some rice. That's an idea that I can get. If you present this idea of or bibimbap, like bibimbap could be a very good concept sort of restaurant. Everyone understands that it's rice with different toppings that you mix together and eat.
We have Bibigo in Los Angeles now, and Sai is the spokesman. They're all there. I haven't seen a closed Bibigo,
okay.
So I guess it's not doing terribly.
Yeah, okay. I think that the concept of that is infinitely expandable, but you have to have that one solid idea of what you want to do. Sure, if you're going to do a tteokbokki place, you'd have to do just tteokbokki, and you can do that. There are a lot of different varieties of it, but I feel the barriers of entry for tteokbokki is one. The rice cakes tend to be very, very chewy, and so sometimes the sauce, it could be, the traditional one might be too spicy. And I mean, would Americans go to a place just to eat tteokbokki?
This American would.
Well, then
You're American too. Tell me, what's your opinion?
I mean, like, I will go to, you have to go to Shindang tteokbokki town then.
I went, that was a priority, believe me.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great place to visit. I think that from a business standpoint, it wouldn't be successful.
I see.
It wouldn't be something like, I think Americans would go to maybe a poppingsu place, and you could do one thing of poppingsu, and maybe that would work. That could be like a big hit. But maybe tteokbokki, no. Something like if you can find kind of fringe sort of society customers and stuff like that, I guess, or like, for example, like sundubu. Sundubu is a very popular, like, after clubbing sort of meal I've heard, like, in LA.
Yeah, definitely. I live in Koreatown, so my perspective is again skewed, but you can get it all over the place.
Yeah, and that's something that I think has universal appeal. And, you can do a lot of different varieties of that. And sure, you could probably have a Korean place, focus on one food, and then you can add other stuff to it. But if you're going to have all these different varieties of Korean food, I find that generally they can't really do one thing well. They do everything, but it's not all very good.
That can be a problem. You don't come away with a distinctive thing to talk about, certainly, but what's a quintessential food experience someone needs to really get to know Seoul? If they're coming here, staying a while, what types of food experiences do you think without which they cannot really know the city well?
Well, I think they have to do they definitely have to do barbecue, like a late night barbecue thing with the alcohol, and then finish it with a bowl of doenjang jjigae, which is the spicy soybean stew, and that's like a perfect meal in Korean eyes. That's definitely something to check out. I think the fish market, like Korean seafood, is very, very different from Japanese sushi and everything. It's usually you get just a sashimi and you wrap it in leaves, and afterwards you can get like the fish soup meat from the bones, which is delicious. Oh, and you can also get the live octopus. That's something that is very, very exciting. It's scary at first, but it tends to be very delicious. So it's a lot of fun.
Right. It's even the hardest foods you can sell an adventurous foreigner on them, can't you?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, have people that you've taken on tours, have they made you think about Korean food in different ways from seeing this constant stream of sort of new perspectives on it?
Oh yeah, I've learned a lot from our guests that have come on the tours. Like they their versions of what they think is Korean is not what's here. Like they keep on telling me about Hawaiian guests always tell me about meat jun, which is like it's marinated beef that's dipped in egg and pan fried. And
sounds Hawaiian.
yeah, but they search the entire city for it, and I'm like, Koreans don't really eat jun that way.
I see.
There are some places that do it. It's actually down south. Over by the city of Gyeongju, it's very famous for that. But it's made its way to Hawaii and has become this loved Korean dish.
Hawaiian Korean dish.
Yeah. I always learned that in overseas, with barbecue and everything, everyone gets the rice first, and my guests, they get like freaked out when they're sitting and eating a meal, but rice is not there. And I'm like, oh, in Korea, rice comes after the meal. Right. So that's something that's kind of interesting. They always tell me like, like in Russia, they have the most popular, kimchi is a carrot kimchi, and I'm like, carrot kimchi? That's something that I haven't really thought of. Yeah. Huh. And I mean, it's really interesting to see how people eat, especially something like bibimbap. Bibimbap, we have people that won't mix it; they just eat it plain.
One of the parts at a time.
Yeah. The other thing is like whenever they're eating rice, they always use chopsticks, and always try to explain to them Koreans like to eat with a spoon,
right?
Because you want to get with everything mixed in there, you want to get a bite of all the nutrients, the vegetables and stuff mixed in, and they think that, oh wow, that's really interesting.
It's true. I've seen some interesting foods eaten with chopsticks here, like quesadillas and cake. Okay. Yeah, they bring out the chopsticks.
Yeah, the cake's very interesting to do.
Now, what's been your experience introducing your American parents to Korean food and to Korea?
Oh, they loved it. They absolutely love Korean food. Whenever I go home, I make a Korean feast. I always get requests for the same thing, like japchae and bulgogi, and they love the banchan, the pickles and stuff that I make. They're not really used to eating that way. So part of it is kind of education, and also like it's my hidden agenda to make them eat healthier.
Sure.
Yeah, so I try to...
Always an issue in America.
Yeah. So, when I go there, I always do barbecue with a lot of leaves for wrapping, and I make the samjang sauce, the dipping sauce. And I explain that you can eat it this way. You don't even need to have bread, and you don't need to have all this other stuff. Have a small salad and everything. So it might not be authentically Korean, but the Korean food, like the idea of Korean food is there. You should have the fresh leaves. You should have something cooked. You should have the fermented sauces. And when you eat everything together, you will be able to digest it easily, and you'll get the optimum amount of energy from it. And so that's one of the main ideas when Koreans think about food.
Is Korean food really as hard to make as people say it is?
It's not. It takes more time. Especially something like kimchi, it does take some more time to do it because you have to get the right sort of ingredients and the environment to ferment. So that might be a little bit tricky for someone. I mean, fermentation is something that you can't see. It's something that you believe it's happening.
Yes. There's a bit of faith involved.
Yeah, there is a lot of faith involved. And in Korea, there is a lot of superstitions around making the kimchi and making the soy sauce and the bean paste and everything like that. Right. If it's getting too hot or something like that, people go out and pray, or they'll hose down the kimchi pots with a hose to kind of cool them down. If they feel like it's not fermenting properly, they'll wrap a rope around the pots, and that have bits of charcoal and chili and pine needles on them, and it doesn't do anything. But the shamanistic belief is that it will help with the fermentation.
Right. There's ways in which that shamanism lasts through today. But people can come here if they want to learn to make Korean food, can't they? What do they do if they want to learn from you here, from your school here?
Well, they just go to our website, it's ongofood.com, and just pick the class that they want, and they can pick a class.
Whether they want a class or a food tour, the same place to go, and they can read about the food in Seoul on Seoul Eats, or they can, what else can they can go to your, I hope they do go to Brew 314, because it's always something foreigners who have been here a long time say. You get them talking long enough, the resident foreigners, they complain that Koreans put too much weird stuff on their pizza. I take it that's not the case at Brew 314.
No, we just do cheese, we have a chicken pizza, and we have a meat pizza.
These are all projects of my guest today, Daniel Gray. He is a partner here at Ongo Food Communications. He is the proprietor of Brew 314 in Insadong. He runs Seoul Eats, the website to go to if you want to learn about eating food in Seoul or indeed in Korea. Daniel, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. And special thanks to all the backers of Notebook on Cities and Culture's Korea tour on Kickstarter. Adam Hartzell, Aidan Nullman, Alfred Lee, Andy Cooney, Angus Gordon, Bala Chinupati, Cam Smith, Chin Music Press, Dan Caroselli, Danny, Deborah Smith, Emmett Farragher, Umberto Grant, Ian Plosker, Ismail Kennedy, Jackie Gast, Jay Chang, Jeffrey Davis, James DeVito, Jonathan Filbert, Josh Paget, Kimberly Hahn, Manvir, Mark Hines, Matthew Workman, Maureen Kincaid Speller, Monica Eck, Michael Fransky, MJ Pritchett, Patrick O'Flaherty, Patrick Park, Piers Rippey, Robert Salzberg, Samuel Hansen, Sean Brown, Themistocles Crucis, Thomas Unterberger, Timothy Dobbs, and Wayne Wright.